Hey everyone, my name is Tyler, and you've made it. You've made it to the end of the conference. I'm pretty sure I'm the last talk. I'm going to be talking about simplify testing of REST APIs and auto-generating code using AutoRest, which is honestly just the most complicated title for a talk that I feel like I need to add like on the blockchain to the end of it. Just so we're clear, I'm kidding. This is not a blockchain talk, but my goal in this talk is to do one thing, and that's really just to spark interest in you. This is a topic that I kind of stumbled upon one day, and I thought, wow, this looks really cool. Let me go ahead and give a talk about kind of like some of the things that I've messed around with, and the intent is that you will take kind of what you see today and go do your own learning on it, and bring it back to your projects, to your companies, whatever you'd like. My name is Tyler. As I said before, I'm a software engineer at Microsoft, and I work on the PowerShell team there. If you want, you can follow me on Twitter or Twitch. My handle is the same, Tyler Leonhardt, my full name. Today, our goal is to do one thing. We're going to take some YAML and we're going to turn it into a couple of different languages. One is PowerShell script because I'm on the PowerShell team, but also some TypeScript. Okay? And I'm going to tell you how we're going to do that. But first, I just need to do this really quickly. It's something I have to do. I got to talk about PowerShell just for a brief second because I do want to like call out some of the new things that we're doing because history is a thing. PowerShell, I'm just going to go through this really quick. Ready? It's a shell and scripting language. It's kind of like Bash or Z Shell, Fish. The difference, though, between those is that it's an object-oriented shell. So the idea is you've got commands that you're running in your terminal, and in a language like Bash, you're often piping text to another command. But in PowerShell, everything is an object, so you actually get to pipe objects to commands down the pipeline, which is a bit of a unique thing about PowerShell. It's also 100% open source. All of my work that I do is open source at my job, and it's cross-platform. So, of course, it works on Windows as it has in the past, but it also works on macOS and Linux in Docker containers, on Alpine, and even today I'm giving this talk on a Mac. So, yeah, that's my tiny spiel about PowerShell. Check it out if you're interested. And yeah, so back to what we were actually talking about. We're going to be mostly talking about this concept called the OpenAPI Spec. And it sounds kind of daunting. You might have heard it by another name called Swagger Spec in the past. But the OpenAPI Spec is this format for declaring the inputs and outputs of your REST API. So you might have a REST API, which is just like a web server that defines a bunch of different routes. And the OpenAPI Spec is a way to list out all of the details about your REST API. And like I said, it sounds scary, but it's really just a bunch of YAML or JSON if you prefer. Either one works. And it looks a little something like this. So let me just go through this line by line real quick. This is an OpenAPI specification. And I went with YAML because it's a little bit less, or it's a little smaller to see on a screen. So up at the top there, we've got OpenAPI : 301. That is the version of the spec that we're using. And then the info down below is basically the generic, like, what is this spec describing? So in my case, it's the name of my REST API is Rainier, which is a mountain close by Seattle, where I live here in Washington State in the US. The description of gets whether or not the mountain is out. This is a saying we have here that's basically like, can you see the mountain? If you can see the mountain is out. It's a very Seattle joke, considering it's cloudy most of the time, then you can't really see it. So the version is the version of this spec that I'm using. Servers might be a bit self-explanatory here, but server is the URL of where you can find the REST API. And then the meat of the spec is in the paths. So underneath paths, you can see I have /API. So I have one route there, /API. It accepts a GET request, so HTTP GET verb. It's got a summary for gets whether or not an operation ID, which I'll cover. That's where you also define the responses. So it has a response of 200, 200 OK, status code, and then the content is application JSON. So it returns JSON back. And the schema of that JSON can even be declared down below, where you see that I've got result is a Boolean, an image is a string. This is a very basic, but an open API specification. And you might be looking at this, and I can't see the chat right now, and so I can only imagine what you all are saying after seeing this, but you're probably saying something along the lines of, but why? Why would I do that? Why would I do any of that? And, well, the answer to that is because tooling. Think about it like this. If you were to write this one little YAML of your definition of your REST API, that opens the door to a bunch of different experiences that you would get for free, quote unquote, mostly free. Number one, I'm going to go through a couple of them right now. Number one is what's called the Swagger UI. And honestly, if you've messed with like open REST APIs out in the wild, you might have seen something like this before, where you have like basically this UI of the definitions of the REST API. So every route, so down below you see there's like /pet, which is a post request, /pet, a put request, and all these things, right? And all of this whole website is auto-generated from that YAML file before, right? But even like, I mean, it's nice to see like a UI version of what your REST API does, but it also goes a step further and allows you to actually make requests against that REST API. So in this case, /pet ID, you can put in the pet ID you want, hit execute, and you get back the response. That's just like one of the examples. And like, if you've never heard of this like open API spec, Swagger spec before, you're going to stumble upon some like REST API that you're using and be like, oh my gosh, it's the Swagger UI. And then from there, you can like kind of dig around and see if there's specification somewhere that you could potentially leverage in other tooling. So the main focus though today that I'm going to be talking about is something called AutoRest. Now, AutoRest is a project that came out of Azure, Microsoft Azure, Microsoft's cloud provider, if you're not familiar with it. And the concern was that, look, Azure has a ton of APIs. And the hardest part is that Azure supports so many different languages. And it's really hard to keep all of those libraries and all those different languages up to date with APIs that are constantly changing, right? And so AutoRest, the goal was to take that open API spec and turn it into a bunch of different languages. So Go, C#, TypeScript, Java, Python, PHP, Ruby, and PowerShell. And so that was the goal of AutoRest. And so I'm not going to look at the slides anymore. So I know you don't want to like see any more slides. So we're going to go right into a couple demos. The first demo will be that Swagger spec that we saw in my slides. We're going to pipe that through AutoRest and see what kind of what the result is. And then we're going to look at this other example that I found online. All right. Cool. Just doing a quick look at the chat here. All right. So let me go ahead and increase this so that you can see. Hopefully that's going to be big enough. And let me make this a little smaller. So first of all, what I'm showing here is there's a bunch of like resources that I have on this talk, and basically all the code that you see here is on a GitHub repo that you can check out. And I've included a README of basically the exact steps that I ran through this talk, which is it's great for you to be able to repro what I was doing, but also great for me in the event that I forget what I need to actually run. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the first example here. So Mount Rainier was the first one we're going to look at. And just so you can do the comparison, so here's the original YAML that we saw before, right? Here's a JSON version of it as well, if you're curious. And it looks, I mean, it's the same thing, right? Because it's just the same definition. The only thing that I don't really care for with the JSON one is that there's a bunch of these, like, you know, right curly braces that end up showing up in your spec, which is just, I mean, that's JSON, right? But I don't know. I find the YAML one a little bit more readable, but to each their own. They both work. So, all right, let's go ahead and do the thing, shall we? So I'm gonna cd into Mount Rainier here. All right, and let's see. I've got the thing. Cool. Let me see the command that I need to run here. It's like, what is it? Not this one. It's Mount Rainier .yaml. There it is. Okay, cool. So here's the command that I'm going to run, and it's I mentioned this in the README as well here if you want to follow along. But you'll need to like go and get AutoRest, get Node, and PowerShell if you want to do the PowerShell examples as well. But here's the command that we're going to run. AutoRest, the input file is that spec. The output folder is where the auto-generated results will go. And then in this case, I'm specifying PowerShell. All right. And just so we're clear, I am using PowerShell for this demo. This is the latest and greatest PowerShell. I've just like customized my prompt to the T because I like to do that. Great. So it ran. It did the thing. Yeah. Let's take a look at what's inside. So this generates just like a ton of stuff. Like it's honestly like the one that gets generated from PowerShell gives you like so many different resources on how to make like really nice. There's like there's a docs folder on how to like write nice docs, examples on where your examples will go, and tests as well, and all that fun stuff. But just to prove to you that it did work, let me go ahead and cd into that directory, right? And here, I'll clear my screen a little bit, and I'm gonna build it. So AutoRest generates code. But the code that this generates is a bunch of C#, and we can actually like see that if we go into this generated folder. There's like C# here, and something that you can do within PowerShell is you can actually write modules for PowerShell in C# and then build them into like a DLL that you can load into PowerShell. So you don't have to write PowerShell script to write PowerShell commands, which is kind of neat. But anyway, sidetracked. Let me just go ahead and run the build thing. We're going to build it, and here we go. So that's going to build a module, and then the other thing that we do is we need to import that module into the session that we're currently using, this into the PowerShell session. So we can import this Mount Rainier.psd1 here, okay? And from there, we can take a look at the commands that this new module that we imported gives us. And so we could see that I got one command from that, which is get Mount Rainier. And so, oh, what is this? Discord just kind of freaked out on me. Well, sure, that's fine. Anyway, run get Mount Rainier, and we got back image and result, which is exactly what we expected to get returned because of the schema in our OpenAPI spec. So get Mount Rainier, this command that gets generated comes from the use of the operation ID. So that's how you can like finer tune the stuff that gets outputted. So unfortunately, the mountain is not out. Let's double check that. Yeah, it's pretty cloudy. It's a picture from the Space Needle, and then I like this is like a service that I made a long time ago, but it basically like takes does some like tagging to see what's in this picture, and if there's a mountain in the picture, then therefore the mountain is out. It's very like low effort, and I use some third-party service because I'm not a machine learning expert or a computer vision expert. But yeah, so it worked. We got this free PowerShell module, all because I wrote some YAML. So obviously you're like, okay, cool example, one route, Tyler, come on, give us something better, right? Okay, fine. So I was walking around the internet as one does, and I found this website from the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And for those of you who are outside the US, this is basically just a database of bank data. This talks, so like we look here, institutions, so like this is listing of FDIC insured banking institutions and where they're located, all that stuff, right? So I was like, oh wow, this is interesting. I'm impressed that the FDIC has an API to expose this. And so I scrolled down a little bit and I was like, wait a minute. Look at this. Does that look familiar to you? That's the Swagger UI from my slides. And so I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So they definitely use the Swagger spec or OpenAPI spec. And so then I scrolled up a little bit, and sure enough, there it is, full OpenAPI specification. There it is. Amazing. So I was like, all right, let's take this doc. We'll just throw it through AutoRest, and we'll just see what happens, right? And so I did, just to be totally transparent, I had to make two changes to this. One is I had to change the URL to be the full URL because I had downloaded the file. And the other thing is just for consistency, this references a couple of other YAML files, and so I just inline those into one big YAML so you could see just how massive this this spec is. All right, are you ready? Here it is. So here, let me make that smaller. Here is this massive spec. I don't know who wrote this, but wow. 3,000 lines of an OpenAPI spec. Anyway, so I think it's pretty fair to assume, maybe not, but I'm going to assume that the FDIC did not write this spec to be plumbed through AutoRest. And so my thinking was that there's no way that this will, work 100%, but I was curious to see if it worked at all. And so, all right, here we go. Let's do it, right? So we'll do this. So I'm going to compare, where am I? Oh yeah, there we go, FDIC. I'm going to compare the PowerShell example. So you could see like simple PowerShell versus complex PowerShell module. And then we'll do my TypeScript example and show you how also it works surprisingly well for that given the situation. Okay, so I'm in FDIC here. I'm gonna, let me Control R here and do fdic.yaml. That's the JS one, PowerShell. Okay, so same deal. AutoRest, input file, FDIC YAML, output folder, PS, FDIC, PowerShell, v3. This time I'm specifying v3 just to say, listen, this is a v3 spec. Don't think it's a v2 spec. Here we go. So right from the get-go, we see some warnings, right? And I think that's to be expected. Like I said, I don't think the FDIC thought to throw their YAML spec through AutoRest, but it completed, the generation completed, which is impressive to me. So let's see what we got, right? So clear this. So, you know, we don't need to look at the insides. We looked at the insides of the other one, but let's go ahead and build the thing. All right. Build. Cool. All right. And then we will import the, what did we call it? What did it end up being? Is it PS FDIC or is it? Yeah, it's FDIC bank data API beta dot PSD1. All right, imported and module FDIC bank data API beta. Awesome. 4 functions. Nice. So let's use the search one. All right. So I'm going to run this search structure institution. I should also say, you know, you could do something like get help search structure institution and like see more information about it if you'd like. There's a way to specify examples which would come out of your folder and stuff like that, but there's a lot that you can do here. Let's go back to this search structure institution, and I'm specifying a filter which I got from their website, the filter syntax, and here we go. Cool, we got some data back. So let me store that to a variable. And then, like I said, PowerShell's object-oriented, so I can just like do data, and I know it's .data, and see a whole bunch of information. Now this looks a little cramped, so maybe let's just take the name and address. And there we go. So now we could see, I think it just gave us like 10. There's probably some kind of pager involved, but there we go. It actually worked. I'm impressed. I hope you are too. I was impressed. All right, one more thing, because we're getting close on time. I'm gonna do the TypeScript example as well. So same deal, AutoRest. It's FDIC.yaml, FDIC. Okay, I'm specifying Node.js this time. Now, the AutoRest team is working on a better one where you would do -s TypeScript, but didn't quite work with the spec at the moment. So I'm using one of their older ones, this Node.js one that surprisingly worked. So let's go into, so you could see, here's what I did with this one is like, I have FDIC.json here. This is the code that was actually generated. And we see that they have generated some TypeScript, some typings, and some of the actual JavaScript. And so I created a little test file so you could see kind of like what it could do here. And naturally, since I'm in VS Code, I get all the completions and everything. So I could do like my FDIC, cool, dot. I got all my stuff here. I could get search locations, for example. What else can we do? And you know, like the whole, it's all there, right? It's right in my editor, which is like pretty amazing considering like all I wrote was, or all I had to make this was a YAML file. All right, so I'm just gonna run this really quick and then finish up with my last slide, and then that's it. So I know I need to run npm install, npm run compile, and npm start. I'm just gonna do them all at once. So npm install is gonna run. Cool. npm install ran, compile. It does give me a couple of issues, and I think those are going to be those are going to work in the new TypeScript one, but it didn't this time. But anyway, and so if I look here, I've got all of the data. All it does is just like logs out all the information. But you know, this is the bank Truist, which coincidentally is the bank that my dad works at. But yeah, it worked, and this was the code to do it. It looks like TypeScript. The filter syntax is a little weird, little odd, but yeah. All right, last slide for all of you. Caveats. I should clear up some things. One, the generators might not support everything. Open issues if you have any issues with it. Code generation is a very, very, very hard problem, so make sure you test anything that you auto-generate. And AutoRest can only do so much, so be super verbose, add operation IDs and any other things to make it super, to set AutoRest up for success. All right? I got a bunch of links. I can't believe this is it. The end of the Live Coders Conference. So excited to be a part of this one. I'm so excited for the future ones to happen. Last chance, like donate to Black Girls Code. Do all the things. We got to hit this goal. It's got to happen. And all right, I guess. Thank you so much for watching this. I hope this was interesting to you and worth your while. And I'm gonna go ahead and pass it on over to Liz. Thank you.